Podcast. I'm here with my co-host G-Dog, as you all know him well, and I'm here with Stefan Hoops. Stefan, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for coming to Frankfurt for this discussion.
No, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Now, to give you guys a background, Stefan is the chief executive of Germany's largest asset manager, DWS. And the first question I have for you, Stefan, is could you give us an idea of your personal sporting history?
So I started doing gymnastics and track and field when I was probably 3 or 4 years old. And then at the age of 10, we're actually quite decent in gymnastics. And at the age of 10, we had to go to one of those, training kids for Olympics sort of tryout. And when we arrived, they checked our wrists and they just looked at me and said, all right, you're going to be too tall. You don't even need to train, play basketball. And so then coincidentally, I started to play basketball at the age of 11 and had did that reasonably seriously until I was probably like 18, 19, 20. And then at some point, had to take other things more seriously. And ever since, I've just been doing a combination of lifting weights, obviously, boxing, running, the usual stuff.
But at the age of 14, you had quite a pivotal moment when I think you were thrown out of the basketball team. Can you explain?
So in Germany, you always play for clubs, but then there was at a state level, there were also state all-star teams or state selection teams that would then compete for like a German championship of all the states. And ultimately you would get drafted for the German national team. And I was part of the state selection team at the age of 14. And then with like a week of training. And towards the end, the coach said, look, unfortunately, you get cut because you're the physically weakest player out of a group of 20.
And what did that do to you at the time emotionally? That must have been quite a lot to take at 14 years old.
It sucked. There's no question about it. And then, I guess, can I also refer to you as G-Dog?
Yeah, yes. Of course you can. You have
Please,
to.
You have to.
I guess what G-Dog then probably read because I spoke about it on LinkedIn at some point. Spoke to my parents about it because it did suck, right? To get cut not for lack of basketball skills, but lack of physical strength. And my dad said, well, but that's not a problem. To build muscle and to get stronger is the easiest thing in the world. All you have to do is work out every day. So anyone can do it. And he gave me one of those, what do you call them, like chest expander or whatever they're called.
Bull worker, I think.
Yeah. So he gave me his old one, which at that point was already, 20 years old. And I've been using it pretty much every day.
And the great irony is in this seating plan for this podcast, Angus clearly here, close to camera, Stefan there, close to camera, and me at the back.
You look quite small, don't you?
Looking quite small. So the irony that Stefan was accused of being too weak and now is this jacked chief executive is very transparent in this podcast studio.
So 18 years old, you discovered weight training?
So at 14, I started.
Okay, you started at 14.
But that was like, body weight, right? So I did a lot of with that thing, like with the, what do you call it, chest expander, or what do you call them?
I'm trying to think what it is.
The brand name, I used one when I was a kid and it was called a bull worker. Then it was, I think, an American brand. But it's probably, the word is probably a chest expander, yeah.
So that's what I used, I had some dumbbells, but otherwise was like mostly with push-ups and stuff like that. I went to become an exchange student in the US at the age of 15. And that's where I started going to the gym on a regular basis, right? So there was this gym, that sponsored the basketball team. So we had like free access. And that's when I started going pretty much every morning. So I've been lifting pretty consistently for 29, 30 years.
And how much would you say your training program has developed over time from 15 years old? Obviously, it will be dramatic how much it's developed, but how important is it that you've learned and developed that program over time?
If I knew back then what I know now, it would make such a big difference, right? You're obviously a personal trainer, so I guess you would advocate for having a personal trainer. And it's interesting how, even now I've picked up certain things over the last 12 months that I look back and I was like, why would I ever breathe a certain way? Like, why would I ever stretch in a certain way? So what I find interesting about lifting specifically is there's so many things that come together. Nutrition, sleep, different workout routines. So I feel I work out completely differently now than even 5 years ago, certainly very differently to 20, 25 years ago.
Schwarzenegger talks about the move from Austria to the US. Did you find that move to the US changed your perspective on lifting, changed your perspective on basketball? You're moving to the home of basketball.
Yeah, 100%. So I think basketball, everyone in Germany got infected when the Dream Team played in the 92 Olympics. So that's when it's like my generation of Germans really started to play. And when I moved to the US for a year in 95, 96, again at the age of 15, nobody was lifting weight in Germany. I mean, you would have in my city of 500,000 people, there were maybe 5 gyms. And nobody, like no teenager would lift weight. And the US was very different. So in the US, almost everyone, I mean, I went to California for a year, so maybe, so like that beach culture is slightly special even for US dimensions. But it was almost normal to go to the gym and not go to the gym. I think now it's different, right? But even it seems that Germany is probably like a generation behind, where people above the age of 40, 45 in Germany wouldn't really lift, whereas in the US, it's still quite normal to go to the gym. I think younger Germans, so age of my kids, I think it's more normal to actually work out.
And do you find that the fact, I'm not hiding any secrets, you are 44 years old, I think, right? The fact that you are clearly in that age group you've just talked about and you lift weights, do you find yourself as being an inspirational character to people within DWS because you lift weights? Do you see other people taking it up and taking your advantage?
I think it's quite dangerous to speak of yourself as being inspirational, right? That's probably one of those quotes which is going to be made fun of. I think one, to actually have a proper work-life balance and make it clear to people that I do love my job, I love our company, and I do work hard and I put in the hours, no question about it. But the fact that I have a family which I would choose any day over work, the fact that I do go to the gym every day, right, and make that a point even when I travel, I think probably shows people that it's okay to have hobbies outside of work. Now, it's not that you have to lift weight in order to become senior. I mean, if you want to sing opera or just read or be an artist, that's also fine. But to have some distraction, something to just relax you, I think that's quite important.
How essential and how much does it impact your performance, your weight training routine as a chief executive?
I don't know it any other way. So I have no idea how it would be, like how different it would be if I didn't. I think my team would tell you that they can probably, they have probably a pretty good idea what I worked out in the morning, because I'm in really good mood when I do shoulders or chest. I'm typically sore if I worked out back, right? I dislike arms because it's just like such a small piece, right? It's not really satisfying to. So I think it definitely affects my mood. I would say that, I mean, there's certainly the focus, the intensity. Whatever good ideas I have, I typically have in the gym because you're relaxed. I always have a couple of things I want to think about, and, read research and certain things I want to think about when I'm in the gym. So typically good stuff comes out of it. So I don't know it any other way, but I rarely get tired, which I think probably comes from sport. I don't recall when was the last time I was sick, which is probably somewhat correlated to being athletic and working out on a regular basis. So it does have a positive impact.
There must be an example of a day when you haven't gone to the gym, maybe on a business trip, and has that affected you negatively?
It probably does, but again, we have to differentiate between coincidence and causality. So I would miss gym if I have a super early flight. So the flight from Frankfurt to London City is like at 6:20 or something. So it's difficult to get a proper workout in before, right? And so then I'm not happy, but it can also be because I do get up very early without even going to the gym. So therefore, it's difficult to look at the causality. I think if I don't work out for 2 days, which may happen occasionally if we're on vacation, and this year we took the kids on a trip across the West Coast, and while I always want to have hotels with a gym, it was very difficult to insist on it on a family trip, right? I mean, there's like other preferences that were more important. And so like on day 2, my kids, my wife said, look, I mean, Daddy needs to hit the gym, otherwise he's going to be upset, right, the next day.
Obviously, you're an extremely busy individual, chief executive, father of 3, so massively occupied there as well. A lot of people use the excuse of time and not having enough time. Do you have any advice for those individuals?
I mean, it's all about focus, about how you structure your day, right? I mean, stating the obvious, everyone has the same quantum of time available, right? And then We do need to have proper sleep, but I think every person has, 17 hours of time at hand. A lot of time gets wasted on social media, Netflix, stuff like that. I mean, you can do it. I mean, I'm not, whatever. If people choose to do it, fine, they should do it. But then don't complain that you didn't have time to go to the gym. So I will, clearly I work more than 9 to 5. It's not that I work 16 hours, so I have enough time for gym and family. But then it's just about prioritization. And I always like to go to the gym in the morning. And then there's really no excuse why not to do it, because you just get up early enough to go to the gym before you start whatever else you have to do. And that's why, if you want to do it, there's certainly not an excuse or reason not to.
Those examples of those days when you said, for example, going to London and flights early, would you not go to the gym in the evening before dinner?
It's not, because if I do a day trip, I will leave my house at 5. Now we'll come back at 10:30 at night, right? So that's quite extreme, and I'm not going to take a gym back on a one-day trip, right? Yeah. So, but those are pretty rare occasions. So I would say I probably lift or go to the gym, 19 out of 20 days. So it's pretty rare occasion that I don't.
Can you talk a little bit more about basketball and the connection between basketball as a sport, the mental aspect of basketball, and how that connects to leadership?
Very happy to. And my analogy is always basketball. I'm sure that, I think you played cricket, Angus, right? I'm sure you can have the same analogy for cricket. But what makes a good basketball player and what makes somebody successful in business, I think depends on 3 categories of skill. One is what's in your genes, right? You just need to be very realistic in what you have versus the peer group that you compete against, right? So at 6'2", I'm not short, right? But I'm pretty short for a basketball player. So that's definitely a genetic limitation that I had for a basketball player. Same applies to to finance, right? I'm sure both of us were pretty decent in math, but working Goldman Sachs or DWS, we are probably not the best in math in our respective companies. So you just need to be cognizant of how you stack up in the stuff that you cannot influence versus the peer group that you compete in that special thing. And you can look at height, athletic ability. A bunch of things are simply in your genes. Second level would be isolatable skills, right? And that would be in basketball, running, shooting, dribbling. In lifting, it would be how you stretch, there's like a bunch of things that you can, either you have a gifted personal trainer or you just check on Wikipedia, but things where you can just isolatedly get better in something very specific, right? It would be bond math, accounting, presentation skills, and so on. And then there's a third level, which you can call the secret sauce, but it's all of the little things that you only pick up over time. You try something, fail, never do it again, try something, works out, you just kind of make it part of your routine. That in the business world would be, how do you get your votes in early if you have a great idea which you want the whole team to support? Clearly the way that you and I present now is going to be very different to 20 years ago, right? Because how you run a town hall, how you negotiate. And in basketball, it's similar. When do you follow a play? When do you break out, right? When you're an experienced boxer or basketball player, you always look at the feet of the opponent, because you can only go by somebody if their feet, if their weight is on the front foot, for example, because then you cannot pivot as fast. And I think same in lifting, right? The mental intensity, the mental strength that you need is something which is very difficult to just isolatedly train, right? You just, you practice and get better over accumulating experiences.
Yeah, I think a lot of people discuss, and a lot of scientists have discussed neuroplasticity of your brain and the connection between neuroplasticity and progressive overload in the gym. And by progressively overloading your muscles, your brain is a muscle, neuroplasticity can change your brain as well. And I think the two things are very closely connected.
Yeah, 100%.
Obviously, this podcast is predominantly on lifting and weight training. There will be many listening to this podcast who won't lift and weight train. What advice would you give to people who are starting their weight training journey and are constantly doing cardio at the moment?
Well, firstly, do lift, right? I think it's one of those things that if you travel back in time when you were 80, I'm sure you wish that you had started to lift weights when you were 20 or something, right? And one of the books that I liked, Outlive, which you may have read, I like the idea of there being a bunch of things that at the age of 80 you still want to do. And the one thing that really got me was, do you still want to be able to get your trolley out of the overhead compartment, the plane? Of course you want to do that. But if that's what you want to do at the age of 80, then how strong do you have to be at 70, 60, 50, 40, and so on? So, for those of you listening that do not lift yet, please do. If you're just starting, get a trainer, and just keep doing it, right? And I feel, cardio is important. You and I do some cardio, but I think that lifting, actually weight training, strength training, is so much more important for many things that you do. So you definitely have to have it as the majority of your workouts.
I completely agree. And obviously, coming from a personal trainer, I strongly believe weight training should be at the forefront of your training simply for longevity, which is the point you obviously made.
Yeah, the longevity aspect, it becomes more and more relevant. The older you get, you start to realize, as you see people the same age of you who haven't lifted, and their body's shrinking, and osteoporosis or sarcopenia, and you realize you can stop this and, I think, reverse the aging process.
100%, right? And I think it's not just longevity, but I think what's probably equally important is the health span. So how healthily do you get to whatever age you get to? And when I look at my dad, and my parents live next door to us, he and I jointly work out a couple of times a week, which is fun. He still ran a marathon when he was in his late 60s. At age of 77, he isn't as fit as he used to be when he was in his 50s, obviously, but he's still pretty fit. Right? And it just shows that if you, it's probably never too late. And he's only started lifting weights a couple of years ago when I kept telling him he should. It's probably never too late. But whatever you do, it just allows you to do so many things of daily life, like whether it's to walk stairs, have your grandchild on your shoulders. There's so many things where you simply need strength, right? And that's why it's so important.
Yeah, I think the impact on performance you'd agree with as well is a huge factor to weight training, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think that there's been an impact on your family and so on from your training? Do you feel your children, your wife, how do they react to your training?
I come from a pretty athletic family where my siblings do a lot of sport, my parents do sport, and my wife hits the gym almost every day. She's probably more into her Peloton than into lifting weights, even though she does lift weights every now and then. And it probably does influence our children. So we have 3 daughters. All of them are into sports. The oldest one is a basketball player, volleyball player, whatever she wants to do. The middle one probably likes her workout on treadmill probably more than other things. The youngest is also a basketball player. So I think seeing your parents work out definitely does impact and influence children. The
children do what you do, not what you say. I think that's a really key aspect.
And also just for them to see the discipline and consistency of simply doing it every day has an impact.
Yeah, consistency is absolutely essential in a weight training program, a fitness program. But I'm curious, you seem to have been consistent to an astonishing degree. Has your training program changed as you've become the chief executive compared to what it was before you were chief executive, or has everything stayed the same?
I think probably almost unrelated to certain career steps. I think it's one of those things where you just can continuously get better. Again, the way that I change my nutrition, the way that I change my breathing, the way that I change stretching is probably unrelated to DWS or other things that I've done before I joined this great firm. I think probably the busier you get and the more demanding the job, the more disciplined you have to be in order to still maintain that regimen. So I'm probably strict on business trips where I simply say, when I'm in Asia, I simply cannot do a meeting before 8:30 in the morning because I just can't get up at 4 when I'm in Tokyo, right? And so I've just probably been slightly more, restrictive in how the diary is being planned. I think you probably have slightly more degrees of freedom if you're the CEO of a company because you can dictate when the first meeting takes place. So that probably changed, but otherwise it's probably unrelated, just accumulation of experiences.
And obviously you travel so much. How does your nutrition change?
I think it's quite obvious that you probably should not drink too much. Right, I do like my occasional smoky old-fashioned or a glass of wine. So it's not that I don't drink, but I'm a sort of like moderate drinker is probably what you would be saying. I think taking protein is probably the biggest hack for me. So even when I travel, I have probably like an extra 100 grams of protein every day, right? So at home it's very easy, but even when I travel, either I buy it or I simply take it with me. And I'm doing pretty consistently. I have always a very healthy breakfast. My routine in the hotels is always hit the gym, order a breakfast that will arrive while I'm at the gym. So when I get back to the room, I can eat healthy. Lunch, I try to do healthy. And then dinner is always, it's fun, right? You out with friends, with clients, with colleagues. And I do like my burger in the US or, whatever I eat, India and China and so on. But I think where I can be disciplined, I am trying to be disciplined.
I think when you're on business trips, people assume discipline goes out of the window, but it's all totally dependent on your personal choices. You can choose to eat certain things. If food is put in front of you, you don't need to eat everything that's on the plate. You can say, I'm going to focus on the protein content in this food. If the other content of the food doesn't agree with me, I can go back to the hotel and have my protein shake afterwards to make up for it. So it is all about personal choices, and people don't need to lose discipline just because they're on a business trip. I completely agree with you. But you clearly are a member of a very esteemed group of lifters. We were talking earlier about the infamous deadlift ETF. So many people who say they haven't got time to go to the gym, you are a phenomenal example, but Mark Zuckerberg, Tim Cook of Apple, Howard Schultz of Starbucks, Larry Ellison from Oracle, Sundar Pichai from Alphabet, Richard Branson from Virgin, Larry Fink, one of your competitors at BlackRock, all of them go to the gym. And so I think it's clearly a demonstration that even the busiest people in the world can make time for this. That's really, really important.
And I was a little bit disappointed that DWS wasn't part of that ETF. Right? Maybe you can make that happen. Look, I think if we want to be realistic, we probably need to, again, differentiate between causality and coincidence. I feel some of the character traits that probably make you successful in business life, like discipline, like consistency, tenacity every now and then, are probably also things that translate well if you work out or do other sports. So that could be the, let's say, coincidence. But there's probably some causality, because if you are fit, healthy, I think probably muscle mass is probably different type than, rather being over. Again, I want to be careful how I phrase certain things, but there's probably a causality in being less tired and being focused even after 8 hours of negotiation. So there's definitely that causality. But again, it's also probably certain type of mentality that applies to both.
It definitely is. And what's really interesting is we're all speaking as people who gym 5, 6, 7 times a week, right? One thing we want to get across from this podcast is it's all about optimization. So if you can only get to the gym 3 times a week for 30 minutes or 30 minutes at home, it's about starting from there and then, as we say, progressively overloading your way up to 6, 7 sessions a week. But it doesn't mean you have to do that either. So at the end of the day, obviously you have the discipline. You've been doing it since you're 18 years old. I'm the same. G-Dog's now the same too. But it's all about optimization, isn't it?
100%. And then also purposefully doing that. So if you can show up at the gym and like, what do I do today? Do I stretch? Sometimes you see people at a public gym. They have it's like as if they just happen to fall into the gym without really knowing what they want to do. So if you only go 3 times a week, then make the most of it. Just like in every meeting. Don't just show up for meetings being unprepared and coasting. You can quite easily coast at the gym 7 times, and you go 7 times and lift some weights and there's never any gains, or you go 3 times but fully focused. And again, if we want to look at the analogy between lifting or any type of sport and business, the preparation, the intensity, let's say the planning, all of the stuff you do before or after, I think it's quite similar. And so if you compare a training session to a very important meeting, a very important meeting shouldn't just come randomly. You know that you have an important meeting. You will know what you want to talk about. You will have prepared. You will have gone through your mind saying, all right, I will sit down. This is the first point. You have a certain negotiation tactics. And after the meeting, you will have some follow-up. So it's quite similar to a proper workout. Right? I mean, you don't just show up and just wait for Angus to tell you what you will do today. I mean, I'm sure you will surprise him every now and then.
Right? He does.
But there will be there's like a plan. Right? And
has to be.
And that's why, again, to your point, Angus, whether you go 3 times or 7 times, it's important to make the most of every workout.
Yeah, that's the key I'm taking from the conversation we're having right now is everything you do, you plan ahead. Even your nutrition, you're saying you take the protein with you and you know what you're going to have. And that's advice I give to all my clients, to anyone who follows me on social media. The way you succeed is just optimization and planning ahead. So that's amazing to hear from you.
And this podcast is going to have a very broad and diverse audience. So there will be other chief executives who don't go to the gym that are watching this. For example, in a couple of months, we're going to be interviewing the female version of you who goes to the gym a lot as well. So we're going to have both genders talking about exactly the same topic and how they, as chief executives, also go to the gym. But if one of those chief executives is looking at this now and thinking, God, I feel so inspired by Stefan. What can I do? What is your advice to them? They don't know anything about the gym. They may go along and do a run once a week. But what's your advice to them? They're 44 years old. They've never been to the gym in their life. And they're inspired by this interview. What do you say to them?
So firstly, just do it. I mean, everyone has started at some point. So I rarely go to the gym just to work out. And then, I always read research, or when I'm doing cardio, I will read some documents. I mean, you can quite easily combine stuff.
Habit stacking.
Which you can do, right? So if your point is I cannot go to the gym because I'm too busy, I've written my quarterly earnings statements in the gym. Any LinkedIn I ever do, I do while I'm at the gym. Research I read in the gym. So there are many things that you can do, right? Like if I work out for an hour, I will only do like 10 sets, right? It's not that I'm just constantly hitting the weights. So there's enough time in between.
Rest periods.
So you can do it. I think just like, if this is a chief executive that has just started to lift, just like you wouldn't just randomly walk into meetings, don't randomly walk into the gym, really get a trainer. So I've had phenomenal trainers over the years. There's enough literature, but then, find your routine that works for you, but then just stay with it, right? And I think this continuous improvement is also something which I think many people could relate to that are in senior positions. And that's how you should also go about it. Right? I mean, the first workout, if you look back in a year, you will sort of smile in how you bench press form has improved over a year. And that's totally fine.
One of the mindset shifts I always say to people at starting, we're so ethically driven. So it's, can I have a 6-pack or can I be more toned here? When actually the approach to have is performance-based. So as you said there, look at how far you've come. When you approach weight training from a progressive standpoint, you just focus on that performance, which is where the magic happens, isn't it?
100%. And you just made an interesting point, right? So do you maximize your potential or do you have specific goals? And I think it's important to have both, right? I think you want to have specific goals. I mean, I want to be able to do 5 pull-ups and then 10 pull-ups and 20 pull-ups. So I want to be able to bench press X and then my body weight and then 100 kilos or whatever. But ultimately, it should be about maximizing your potential, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I always try to do both. I mean, I do keep very religiously, I keep track of every weight, how many times, and then I compare what I do today versus last year, 2 years ago, 5 years ago to see whether I'm declining or I'm still doing okay. Every now and then I have a special goal, which, for the last 18 months was to be able to dunk one more time. And I was never a great jumper. So that's had a big impact in how I had to work out, because you wouldn't typically work out the ability to jump high. And so I think it's important to come with the attitude of, just doing as good as you can possibly you can, but also have certain specific goals, which I think is quite similar in a business world.
There's a lot of media coverage about you as an individual. And if I search Stefan Hoops, I see newspaper articles, and one of them repeatedly crops up. And I think maybe it was in Michael Lewis's book, The Big Short or something. It refers to you as a 28-year-old during the global financial crisis. I think you were, correct me if I'm wrong, an ABS correlation trader. And that must have been an incredibly stressful period. as you've said, you've always trained. So I think you were in the office for 72 hours during that period. Presumably you didn't sleep, or you slept on a sofa or something. Did you train? Did you just do push-ups on the floor?
That would be a cool story, huh? Quite honestly, and I was in New York at the time, and I was part of that team, which was sort of made famous in The Big Short. And that 72 hours was the weekend when Lehman went under, Merrill Lynch was bought, your firm had some challenges. I mean, everyone had challenges, right?
Yeah.
And then on Monday morning, you kind of knew what the world would look like. And that weekend, we were in the office. I mean, the press said 72 hours. I said 3 days straight. I have to say those days is a blur when I look back. So I don't know if I hit the gym, did push-ups. I mean, that would be a cool story. I think we're just trying to get through it.
Yeah.
The one thing I remember is that my sister and my now brother-in-law, they'd been dating forever, and I've been telling them, I told my brother, you got, at some point you have to propose. And I remember that on Sunday night, he called me and said, I proposed to your sister. I'm like, this is awesome, man, but I'm tired, right? And he was quite disappointed that I didn't celebrate it more. But that's the one thing I remember. Otherwise, we're just trying to get through it, right? But what I would say, G-Doc, the kind of being in good physical shape, and I drink a lot of water. So everyone will have some life hack. I mean, for me, it's like drinking 10 liters of water a day. And that's why I don't think you can ever get tired or really sick. And that probably also helped me during that time.
Absolutely. I saw or listened to a podcast with James Gorman, the former head of Morgan Stanley, and he was interviewed by Nikolai Tangen from Norges. And he said that he went through an incredibly stressful period and he recovered by gym. The gym had a massive impact on his performance as the chairman of Morgan Stanley. And there's so many examples of senior leaders that say they've relieved their stress by doing some sort of training program.
For sure. The book, which had a lot of huge impact, is The Power of Now. Not sure if you've read it. Actually, nothing to do with lifting weights, right? It's how to be in the moment. Again, nothing to do with lifting weights. But if you apply it to lifting weights, then when you're in the gym, the only thing that matters is getting through the next set. And if you know that you can typically do 5 reps, try number 6, right? And then try until you fail. But the only thing that matters is getting through that set and then the next set. But at that moment, nothing else really matters. And I think that's a massive stress relief, that whatever you have going on, focus on that set, and then you go back to reading research or whatever else you're focused on. Which is also, I think, why I have, whatever good ideas I have typically in the gym, because your mind is completely captivated by something different. And then you go back to thinking about, the next speech or whatever. And that's why I think it's stress relieving.
I can imagine when you're lying on your back in your home gym with 250-kilo dumbbells above you, it's difficult to think about anything else.
That's what you focus on, exactly. Not get killed. Yeah.
Has there been any other eureka moments on your fitness journey that you've discovered that have had a dramatic impact on you?
So I don't know if I'm mentioning too many books here. I don't get any advertisement fees. But what Michael Matthews, his regiment which is really, if you simplify it, few sets, few reps, super heavy weight. That's what I've adopted 4 years ago. And I'm almost annoyed with myself that I hadn't read that book or that approach earlier. Right. So for 25 years, I would purposefully go to the gym and then do 15 sets of 8 reps, and it would feel good because you would be tired afterwards, but your strength wouldn't really go up. And at some point I picked up, that method, which is basically, if I go to the gym, I will do 1 set of 12, 1 set of 10 for 1 just to warm up. I will have a couple of sets of 2 reps, maybe 3, but almost max weight. 7-8 sets of 4 to 6 reps, 2 more sets of 8 to 10, and that's it. But every single rep, every single set is super high intensity. And that, at the age of 40, 41, I was then bench pressing, deadlifting significantly more than I did when I was 35 or 30. And it's one of those things when I'm hadn't I, if I'd only read that earlier. But same, early we spoke about stretching. I had this ridiculous, everyone has a certain area of weakness, right? For me, it's definitely the Achilles tendons, both of which I tore. And then the right elbow, right shoulder I've always had some pain. And at some point I read this book about stretching. And I'm now doing this special stretch for my shoulder. And ever since I've been totally fine. It's easier to sleep, but also to work out, and I'm pain-free. So that's why there's probably a bunch of small eureka moments, but also every now and then it's like a big one.
Are there any other recovery type things you do, like saunas, cold water therapy?
So I like a cold plunge. My wife thinks it's just like one of those stupid things that I've picked up, and probably in 2 years I will do something different, and it's okay. I mean, I think if what she complains about is a cold plunge every now and then I guess we have a happy.
Doing a pretty good job.
I think we have a happy married life, but I think that's probably something which I've picked up. Otherwise, it's just proper stretching before and after, and then good nutrition.
Can you tell us about your basketball experiences with some of your childhood heroes? Because I think your position has given you the ability to maybe live out some of the dreams you had as a teenager. Can you explain some of those?
Yeah, when I arrived at DWS, my predecessor had signed a sponsoring agreement with the LA Lakers. And having been to California, but Northern California, I grew up being a Golden State Warrior fan, so the Lakers weren't exactly my team, but it's obviously a very legitimate, really, really good team. And as part of that, I met a bunch of what they call the Lakers legends, and that was fun. And I mean, the one occasion that you probably have noticed was when Robert Ory came to Frankfurt, and he and I was his assistant. I mean, he ran the clinic for like a coach, like a session.
I think he was a bit taller than you.
He was tall and big, like he's a big guy. So I did feel tiny next to him. But we had like a fun workout for kids of clients and employees. And then I took him for dinner, and that was fun because I was able to ask all the stuff I ever wanted to know. I mean, did Shaq and Kobe, were they friends or not? If you played with Shaq, Hakeem, David Robinson, some of the best centers of all time, how do they compare? So there was, and in a couple of instances, I had to promise him to never disclose what he told me, which I will obviously honor. But that was one of the funnest dinners I've ever had.
I think he was quite amused by your surname.
He was. I mean, hoops, right? Obviously, kind of like the U.S. slang for basketball. And he said pretty good things. I mean, so for example, we compared, I asked him, Kareem versus a Magic Johnson. I mean, like some of those best players of all time. Like, I mean, what made them special? And, again, without naming names, but he said there's certain players who are amazing individually, and they do inspire you by their work ethic or having certain tricks. And there are some that just make everyone around them much better. And that's probably something that you wouldn't really, as a spectator, you wouldn't know, right? Because you wouldn't know who's the type of person who during practice says, come on, Angus, one more, without you can do one more, otherwise you should be on the bench, but like in an inspiring way. And that was interesting to understand dynamics. What was also interesting is how do you actually get coached as one of the best athlete, like the best in your profession? Because again, like when you think about us, I mean, how much, you have a personal trainer, of course, but I don't know how much coaching you've had over the last 10 years in your job. Even though you work at a world-class institution, are very, very senior, right? So if you compare that to the NBA, you would still get daily coaching and daily improvements. And that was quite interesting. So this attitude towards always being able to get better, even if you are like the best in what you compete in. So it was quite interesting to hear from him.
So that willingness to learn, you think, has elevated you being a chief exec and your weight training routine dramatically?
You need to have a certain level of modesty and being humble, right? And I'm sure many friends who would listen to that would be laughing about like me speaking about being humble or being modest. But I am, right? And because, it's kind of coming back to the 3 different levels of skill. You need to be quite realistic in what you have and what you do not. And certain things, however much I would have loved to be awesome in math, which by the way, in trading, I realized that I'm quite decent, but there are many just much better, right? And but being honest with yourself, which I think is a certain level of being humble and being modest, is important, because if you don't have that, then you never open up to being coached, right? And I am reasonably self-confident, but I also feel that I'm pretty coachable, because I just constantly want to get better, and you will only get that by being receptive to feedback and being receptive to proper coaching. And
another key thing I'm taking from you is it's absolutely essential to enjoy it, isn't it? Like your training routine, you love.
I think
depends on the day, whether you're doing your back or your legs.
Right? I mean, I do probably, 5, so like the ideal week would have 5 workouts where I lift, 2 sessions of cardio, and a HIIT workout. So the HIIT workout, I don't even like. So that's probably I accept as being necessary. The cardio comes close to liking, but it's probably also below the liking threshold. I definitely like a bunch of workouts. I love some. But again, it's not that every meeting is so much fun, right? I mean, it's not, you love your clients, but there will be some that you call slightly more happily than
if
others.
Only every day could be a Lift for Life podcast.
But I think, Angus, the important thing is accepting that not every single piece is fun, and that a bunch of things you will need to do in order to then be even better at this stuff, which is a lot of fun. That also is something that you can take from lifting to the business world. And in the end, I think it all comes down to discipline. I mean, one of the things that a mentor once said is that extraordinary things are done by ordinary people with uncommon discipline. And I think that applies to so many things. Right? And again, just going to the gym every day shows that, even when you're at the age of 14, are cut for being the physically weakest player. It does pay off to start lifting.
And your point earlier about basketball is something that we talk about all the time, the power of positivity, and who is your hype person? Who is the person fires you up? And I'm sure that your weight training, your fitness program, and your personality that exudes from that means that you are very much a hype man at DWS, and you can fire the staff up by doing that. So yeah, congratulations.
Just to wrap things up, Stefan, the one question I'd love to ask you is, what advice would you give to our podcast listeners to succeed in life?
Those 3 levels are important. So be very aware of what you have and what you don't have. And some of the stuff that you don't have can be trained. Some of the stuff you don't have cannot be trained, which is okay. Just accept that. But the stuff that you can practice, you have to do in order to maximize your potential. I mean, to me, not maximizing your potential is one of those unforgivable sins, right? That you shouldn't forgive yourself. I mean, I will forgive you, but you shouldn't forgive yourself if you haven't maximized your potential. Now, second is that discipline. Again, like anything can be done. I mean, if you choose to go to the gym now, just go, right? And then never look back. And it doesn't matter that you haven't done it yesterday, but you will do it tomorrow. And I think that discipline to then do it whether or not you like it. I mean, there will be days when it's raining outside and you kind of don't want to go to the gym. It's fine. I mean, that makes a difference, right? Because enough people will not go. If you're the one person that simply sticks to it, sticks to the regimen, that makes a difference. That consistency, discipline, whatever you want to call it, I think will have set you apart from other people that started as analysts and didn't make it to, senior executive at Goldman Sachs. I think the third is then tenacity in anything you do. Just purposefully going about it. If you have a meeting, you attend the meeting in order to succeed, not necessarily to get your point across, but to be, as well prepared, as competitive, as impactfully as you could. Every single gym session, you should aim to lift more than the day before, to get closer to your goal. And I think that tenacity is probably the third point, right? So be accepting and realistic about what you have and don't have, and continue to practice discipline and tenacity.
Fantastic. Stefan, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. And of course, G-Dog, my co-host as well. Great to have you here. Have you had a good time, Stefan?
I enjoyed it. I mean, if I could do this every day, that would be fun.
That's so good. Thanks so much for time. I mean, you're a busy man. Your whole day is packed with meetings. So we started arranging this. I think it's now November. We started arranging it in April or March this year. You've been to China, you've been to India, you've been to America, you've been traveling all around the world. And to fit this into your schedule has been phenomenal. So thank you so much.
So I've enjoyed it, Angus and G-Dog. But next time we have to do a joint workout. I mean, you can choose what we do. I will leave you with one challenge, which to me is kind of the fitness Murph. Right, so I'm sure you've done the Murph workout.
I have heard.
Which is a very, very difficult CrossFit workout. If you do that for weightlifters, what you have to do is you do 100 reps, bench press with your body weight, wherever it is. And after each set, you have the choice between 10 pull-ups or 500 meters rowing, and you do it for time. Right, so 100 reps, bench press your body weight. After each set, 10 pull-ups or 500 meters rowing for time. That's what we're going to do next time.
All I'll say is let's book it in.
Let's book it in.
Thank you for your time.
Guys, thank you so much.